I stumbled upon the job posting while sitting in the corner of a dingy laundromat, where the hum of washing machines mixed with the distant chatter of a TV. It was a simple, handwritten note pinned to a corkboard, half hidden by a flyer for a lost cat and a garish ad for plumbing services. Night attendant needed, Union Station, inquire below, it read, followed by a number scrawled hurriedly in pencil. The promise of work, any work, was enough to pique my curiosity and prompt a call. The next night, I found myself descending into the bowels of a forgotten subterranean subway station. The entrance was tucked away behind a rusted gate that groaned in protest as I pushed it open. Flickering fluorescent lights cast eerie shadows across the cracked tiles, and the faint smell of mildew lingered in the heavy air. My footsteps echoed as I made my way down the narrow staircase, each step feeling like a descent into another world, a world long abandoned and hidden beneath the ceaseless bustle of the city above. The station was a relic of a bygone era, with rusted turnstiles and peeling posters clinging desperately to the walls. Pools of stagnant water dotted the floor, and the distant rumble of trains passing overhead sent vibrations through the ground, a reminder of the life that existed just beyond these forgotten confines. I found the small room that served as the office, its door hanging slightly ajar. It was cramped and sparse, containing little more than a metal desk, a rickety chair, and an old employee manual lying conspicuously atop a dusty shelf. The manual caught my attention immediately. Its cover was faded, the edges frayed from age and neglect. It seemed out of place, almost deliberately left for me to find. As I leafed through the brittle pages, a chill ran through me, a sensation of being watched, though the station was utterly silent, save for the rhythmic drip of water somewhere in the distance. The manual contained a series of bizarre rules, each one more perplexing than the last. Rule 1. Never acknowledge the figure standing at the end of the platform after 2 a.m. Rule 2. Always turn off the lights in the staff room before checking the storage closet. Rule 3. Do not touch the graffiti of the man with the wide grin on the west wall. Rule 4. Ignore any whispers you might hear near the old service tunnel. Rule 5. If you find a single blackened penny on the tracks, leave it be. Rule 6. Should a train appear on platform 3, do not attempt to board it. These rules, cryptic and unsettling, were written in a neat but shaky hand. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were more than just eccentric guidelines left by a previous employee. The air felt charged, as if the station itself was holding its breath. I tried to dismiss the ominous instructions as the product of an overactive imagination or a prank, but there was something undeniably foreboding about them. In the dim light, with only the echo of my own breathing for company, the world above felt impossibly far away, and the station seemed to take on a life of its own. Determined to complete my shift, I settled into the uncomfortable chair behind the desk, the manual still clutched in my hands. It was going to be a long night, and though I told myself the rules were nothing but strange urban legends, I couldn't help but feel a creeping dread. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering intermittently as if taunting me, and I wondered what lay in store if I dared to break one of the rules. The dim, flickering lights above cast a pale glow over the crumbling station, unsettling shadows creeping across the walls like living creatures. I sat in the rickety chair, the musty scent of the aged manual mingling with the damp air as I tried to focus on anything other than the rules that seemed to pulse with their own sinister energy. The longer I sat there, the more aware I became of a bizarre, almost tangible tension that clung to the atmosphere, as if the station itself was watching me with unseen eyes. I tried to steady my breathing, reminding myself of the mundane task at hand. Just endure the night, follow the rules, and go home. My gaze drifted to the clock on the wall, its hands crawling towards the ominous hour of 2 a.m. I felt a growing unease with each tick, as if time itself was conspiring against me. The temperature seemed to drop, the air gaining a sharper chill that seeped into my bones. I couldn't help but recall the first rule, the one that had lodged itself in my mind like a splinter. Never acknowledge the figure standing at the end of the platform after 2 a.m. The words lingered in the forefront of my thoughts, accompanied by an inexplicable sense of dread. I decided to distract myself, standing up and stretching my legs, each step echoing hollowly in the cavernous station. I wandered over to the west wall, where faded graffiti adorned the cracked tiles. Among the myriad of spray-painted symbols, the one depicting a man with an unnaturally wide grin caught my eye. It was unnerving, the smile distorted and exaggerated, as if painted by a hand that had known madness. Rule 3 flashed in my mind. Do not touch the graffiti of the man with the wide grin on the west wall. I took a cautious step back, resisting the irrational urge to trace a finger over the grotesque artwork. Just then, the clock chimed twice, the sound reverberating through the station like a death knell. 2 a.m. I turned, my heart pounding in my chest, and my eyes involuntarily darted towards the end of the platform. For a moment, nothing was there, only the dim shadows pooling in the corners. But then, as if materializing from the very darkness itself, a figure emerged, standing motionless at the far end of the platform. The figure was indistinct, human-shaped but blurred at the edges, as if struggling to maintain form. A wave of cold washed over me, the sensation so intense it felt as though I had plunged into icy water. Following Rule 1 became a Herculean effort, my instincts screaming to turn away, to pretend the figure wasn't there. I forced myself to face the opposite direction, focusing intently on the graffiti again, the grin of the painted man almost mocking in its grotesque cheerfulness. The station seemed to hold its breath, the silence so profound it was oppressive. The awareness of the figure's presence gnawed at my sanity, an insistent pull I couldn't ignore. As the minutes dragged on, an overwhelming instinct to glance over my shoulder threatened to overpower me. But I resisted, focusing instead on the sound of my own breathing, each inhalation and exhalation grounding me in the moment. Eventually, the air shifted, the oppressive presence at the edge of my perception dissipating, as if a great weight had been lifted. I exhaled shakily, the tension in my muscles slowly releasing. The figure was gone, and with it, the suffocating dread that had consumed the station. Rule 1 had been followed, and for now, I was safe. With a newfound sense of urgency, I decided it was time to check the storage closet. I remembered Rule 2. Always turn off the lights in the staff room before checking the storage closet. The thought of plunging the already dim room into complete darkness was unsettling, but the rules seemed to hold a power I dared not challenge. With a reluctant sigh, I reached for the light switch, the fluorescent bulbs flickering into oblivion, leaving me standing in a shadowy room bathed only in the faint ambient glow from the hallway outside. I made my way cautiously towards the storage closet, the door creaking open to reveal a cramped space cluttered with forgotten supplies. The air was stale, carrying the scent of dust and neglect. As I rummaged through the shelves, a sense of unease crept in, a prickling sensation at the back of my neck. The darkness seemed to close in, oppressive and suffocating. Suddenly, a scuffling noise broke the silence, the sound of something moving just beyond the threshold. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze, straining to listen. The noise came again, a soft, furtive rustle. Every instinct screamed at me to turn on the lights, to banish the darkness that held untold secrets. But I remembered the rules, the ominous weight of them pressing down on me. Instead, I reached for the small flashlight clipped to my belt, its weak beam cutting through the darkness, but offering little comfort. The light swept across the room, revealing only dust motes dancing in the air. But on the floor, just inside the closet, lay a single blackened penny. Rule 5 echoed in my mind. If you find a single blackened penny on the tracks, leave it be. This wasn't the tracks, but the unease I felt suggested the rules had room for interpretation. I hesitated, the urge to pick up the penny strong, a compulsion that felt alien and wrong. But something about it seemed off, a sense of foreboding that warned of consequences unseen. I backed away slowly, leaving the penny untouched, the flashlight illuminating its tarnished surface as if it were a cursed artifact. I closed the door to the closet, my heart still racing, as I turned the lights back on. The room returned to its dim, familiar gloom, but the shadows seemed to linger, thicker and more oppressive than before. I couldn't shake the feeling that the station was gradually shifting, the boundaries between reality and something else growing thin. The manual's rules seemed less like eccentric guidelines and more like a lifeline thrown to me in a sea of uncertainty. But with each one followed, a new layer of dread was unveiled, the station revealing itself to be a place steeped in secrets and malevolence. I returned to the desk, the chair creaking under my weight, as I tried to reconcile the bizarre events with the reality I knew. Yet, deep down, I understood that the night was far from over, and the remaining rules loomed ahead, their promises of strange encounters and dark revelations waiting to unfold. My mind was a storm as I sat there, trying to process everything that had just happened. The rhythmic drip of water from somewhere unseen punctuated the silence, each drop a reminder of the relentless passage of time. I turned my attention back to the manual, the pages now feeling like a contract I had unwittingly signed. Rule 4 was next. Ignore any whispers you might hear near the old service tunnel. It seemed straightforward, but the rules had a way of twisting logic, turning the mundane into the sinister. The mere thought of whispers in the dark sent shivers down my spine. The station seemed more alive now, its presence almost palpable, as if the very walls were watching me. I knew the service tunnel was just beyond the east platform, a yawning maw that led into the depths of the forgotten system. The thought of going near it was daunting, but the rules hadn't failed me yet, and ignoring them would be folly. As I stood to make my way over, a soft, almost imperceptible sound caught my attention. It was a murmur, a gentle susurration that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. My heart leapt into my throat as I realized I was already hearing the whispers I was meant to ignore. Panic flared, my instincts screaming at me to run, to flee from the oppressive weight of the unseen voices. But the rules were clear. and breaking them seemed like an invitation to a fate I dared not imagine. I forced myself to remain calm, clinging to the manual's instructions like a lifeline. Focusing on the damp tiles beneath my feet, I tried to pretend the voices were nothing more than a trick of the mind, an auditory hallucination born of exhaustion and fear. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices speaking in a language I couldn't understand. They surrounded me, pressing in from all sides, a chorus of disembodied spirits calling out from the shadows. Each word was a dagger, a sharp and unknowable presence that cut through my facade of composure. I felt exposed, vulnerable in a way I hadn't before, the boundaries between my mind and the station blurring in the darkness. I stumbled through the oppressive haze of whispers, my senses sharpened by adrenaline. The old service tunnel loomed ahead, its entrance a gaping void in the station's crumbling architecture. The whispers intensified, a pleading, urging force that beckoned me closer, each step a struggle against the malevolent pull of the voices. I clung to Rule 4 like a shield, grounding myself in the rhythm of each inhale and exhale. The air was thick, charged with electricity and the scent of decay, as if the station itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to falter. My determination wavered, the whispers rising to a crescendo, an unrelenting tide that threatened to sweep me away. But then, as if sensing my resolve, the voices began to recede, their intensity waning until they were little more than a distant echo. I exhaled, the oppressive weight of the whispers lifting, leaving me standing alone at the edge of the tunnel. I had followed the rule, and though the experience had been harrowing, I was still here, still clinging to the fragile thread of sanity that kept me tethered to the waking world. As I made my way back to the office, a new sense of awareness settled over me. The station's secrets were slowly unraveling, and with each rule followed, I was drawing closer to an undefined truth that lurked just beyond my grasp. It was as if the station itself was testing me, pushing me to my limits, gauging my resilience in the face of the unknown. The rules were no longer just a guide. They were a pact, a binding agreement between myself and the forces that dwelled within the darkness. I returned to the desk, my mind reeling from the night's events. I was exhausted, both physically and mentally, but the rules loomed large in my mind, each one a checkpoint on this surreal journey. The final rule was the most enigmatic of all. Should a train appear on platform 3, do not attempt to board it. The absurdity of a train arriving on a platform that hadn't seen service in decades seemed almost laughable, but nothing about this place adhered to the logic I once knew. The rules had a way of manifesting the impossible, transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary, and I had no doubt that this final rule would be no different. I settled back into the chair, the manual still clutched in my hands, as if by holding it, I could somehow maintain control over the unfolding nightmare. The station's vibrations grew more pronounced, the rumble of trains overhead, a constant reminder of the world that continued to exist beyond these forgotten walls. It wasn't long before the faint sound of metal on metal, a distant clattering, reached my ears. At first, I dismissed it as another auditory hallucination, a product of the night's stress and exhaustion. But the sound grew louder, more defined, the unmistakable clamor of a train barreling down the tracks. My heart raced, the reality of the final rule becoming all too apparent. I stood, the manual slipping from my grasp as I moved towards the platform, compelled by a force beyond my understanding. Platform 3 was bathed in a ghostly light, the fluorescence flickering erratically as if struggling to maintain their grasp on reality. The air was charged with anticipation, a tension that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath my feet. And then, with a shuddering roar, the train appeared, materializing from the depths of the tunnel like a specter from another time. Its cars were dark, their windows opaque, reflecting the station's warped visage in a distorted, nightmarish tableau. I stood transfixed, the train's presence both mesmerizing and terrifying. The manual's warning echoed in my mind, a final rule that demanded adherence despite the overwhelming impulse to board, to uncover the secrets that lay within. But the rules had protected me thus far, a fragile barrier against the encroaching darkness, and I knew better than to test their limits. As if sensing my resolve, the train began to slow, its momentum carrying it towards a stop at the platform's edge. The sound of brakes screeching against metal was deafening, reverberating through the station's cavernous bowels, drowning out all other noise. The train's doors slid open with a hiss, revealing an interior shrouded in shadow, a void that beckoned with promises of answers and untold mysteries. The urge to step forward was nearly irresistible, an instinctual pull that defied logic and reason. It was as if the train itself was alive, a sentient entity that sensed my presence, my uncertainty, and sought to claim me as its own. But I resisted, clinging to the rule, to the knowledge that boarding would mean crossing a threshold from which there would be no return. The train lingered, its doors open wide, a silent invitation to step into the unknown. But I remained rooted in place, my resolve unyielding, the weight of the manual's promise grounding me in the present. And then, as if accepting my refusal, the train's doors began to close, the interior engulfed once more in shadow. The rumble of its engines grew, the vibrations intensifying as it prepared to depart, to disappear into the dark, labyrinthine tunnels from whence it came. The train pulled away, its passage marked by the sound of wheels on tracks, a metallic symphony that echoed long after it had vanished from sight. In the aftermath, I stood alone on the platform, the station's oppressive silence returning to fill the void left by the train's departure. The final rule had been tested, and though the experience had been harrowing, I had survived. The rules had been my guide, a tenuous lifeline that had carried me through the darkest hours of the night, each one a testament to the unknown forces that governed this place. But as I returned to the office, the realization settled over me that the rules were not the end, but merely the beginning. The night had changed me, altered my perception of reality, and I knew that the boundaries between this world and the next were more fragile than I had ever imagined. The manual lay open on the desk, its pages worn and familiar, a map of my journey through the station's twisted corridors. The world beyond the station felt impossibly far away, a distant memory overshadowed by the night's events. I knew I would eventually emerge from this subterranean realm, return to a life that felt simultaneously familiar and alien. But the station's presence would linger, a shadow that stretched across my soul, a reminder that the rules were not just guidelines, but a glimpse into the deeper, darker truths that lay hidden beneath the surface. Though I had escaped the station's clutches, I understood that true liberation was impossible. The station's shadow a constant companion, a reminder of the night I had spent in its depths. The rules had been my guide, my savior, but they were also a warning, a testament to the fragility of the veil between worlds. I knew that I would never forget the night I had spent in its depths, a constant reminder of the fragile boundary between the known and the unknown. How did this story hit you? Did it get under your skin? If it stuck with you, hit the like. And remember to subscribe. The next one's on the way. Until then, sleep light.